former Navy helicopter pilot, federal prosecutor. She's a mom of four, and she's been in a very contentious race against Republican Jack Ciattarelli. And this is one of those campaigns that's getting a lot of national attention. So she said I can call her Mikie, Congresswoman Sherrill, aka Mikie. Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much.
Have you done a Substack yet?
I think I have, but it's been a minute. So
Okay.
it was good to kind of go over some of it beforehand. That was helpful.
Okay. Well, welcome. I'm really thrilled to have this conversation. You have such an impressive CV. By the way, you're from Virginia originally. Where did you grow up?
Mostly Reston, Virginia.
Oh, because I'm from Arlington.
I thought you were from Northern Virginia.
And
Okay, how
where'd you
funny.
go to high school?
South Lakes High School. I graduated with Grant Hill. That's kind of my claim to fame.
Well, you're a lot younger than I am, and I all I know is Eric Schmidt went to my high school, who started Google.
Mm,
Emily
pretty good.
Couric, my sister, who
Oh, I got it. Well, Megan and Mary Sherrill then, yeah.
yeah,
They they
exactly.
are gonna give me something for not starting there.
But my sister was running for lieutenant governor. I don't know if you know
Yeah.
this with God, what is wrong with me? With Mark Warner. And then she was diagnosed sadly with pancreatic cancer, had to drop out of the race and sadly, tragically passed away. But she was replaced by Tim Kaine. And the only reason I mention this is everyone thought that my sister Emily was going to be one day, be the first female governor of Virginia. And now in Abigail Spanberger, it looks like we could possibly get our first female governor. And I know that you two were roommates on Capitol Hill when you were both in Congress. How weird is it that you're both running for governor of your respective states?
It is bizarre, isn't it? She was born in New Jersey. I was born in Virginia. She's running in Virginia. I'm running in New Jersey. She's the oldest of three girls. I'm the oldest of three girls. Yeah, we were roommates in Congress. It's one of those weird things, like Adams and Jefferson dying on the same day. And so, you're just kind of like the universe is a little odd sometimes.
That is odd. It's like that Kennedy Lincoln thing
Yeah.
that we used to look at when we were kids. So, I'm curious. I interviewed Abigail Spanberger. I guess it was last week, or maybe the
Wow.
week before. I can't really remember. But you both obviously served in Congress. And I'm curious why you decided you wanted to run for governor and some of the things that you believe you'll be able to do as governor that you couldn't do as a member of Congress.
Well, we see that the president has just co-opted so much of the power in Washington through the presidency. And I would say definitely it's a problem that Republicans have the majority in the Senate and the House, but the House and Senate leadership have also just given so much power to the presidency. He's co-opted the courts pretty effectively. So there's really a need for governors to stand in the breach here and to expand state power. And you see it in so many different ways. You see it in the Northeast coalition of states working to get vaccines in the wake of RFK, or to give good medical advice, with RFK Jr. putting out some very odd stuff that I think sometimes he gets from influencers on TikTok. So at that point, you need governors to stand in the breach, but it's also in pushing back against things like National Guard on the streets, or clawing back federal money to start to run health programs, because the president's now taking away things like federally qualified health care centers and money for those, and then the SNAP funding. So again and again, you see this attack on how we create opportunity, how we run an economy, how we have children get access to a great education. And it's really governors that have the ability to make change here, and almost no one else at this time.
Yeah, let's talk about some of your positions and why you think you are the best candidate to lead the state. If a Martian landed here and said, Mikie Sherrill, what do you stand for? What would you tell that Martian? That's a very weird question, I realize.
Uh, that does make a good question. What would I tell a Martian? But if the Martian was specifically asking me about running New Jersey, I would say, largely, I am focused on continuing the path that I think the United States has been on for almost 250 years of opening up opportunity to people, meaning that we all know people haven't had a seat at the table, but I look at the background of my family. It was my grandpa's union job after they lost everything in the Great Depression that helped put my mom's side of the family squarely in the middle class, or my dad being able to work and put himself through college and then not be, he wasn't in debt for 30 years, right? He just worked his way through college, got a good job, and that helped my family be securely in the middle class. But even in my own lifetime, when I wanted to go to the Naval Academy and to be a pilot like my grandfather, I remember my dad saying, I was in about the fifth grade, and he said, well, Mike, I don't know if the Naval Academy even takes women or if the Navy has women pilots. But by the time I graduated with the first class of women eligible for combat on ships and aircraft. And that completely changed the trajectory probably of my life and my opportunity. I don't think it's any accident that it was myself and Elaine Luria who were the first Naval Academy graduate women to serve in Congress, because before they changed those rules, you were a second class citizen in the military. And so there are all these ways in which we've opened up opportunity for so many people, and it feels now as if we're in this time of compression of rights, of taking away reproductive rights and economic rights, and the ability to compete in so many spaces. And so I really want to make sure New Jersey continues to open up opportunity to everyone and has that ability. We have one of the most diverse states in the nation. We're one of the most innovative states in the nation. We have more engineers and scientists per square mile than anywhere else. So the attacks that Trump is doing are so out of line with what we want to do in New Jersey. And then my opponent has oddly just really tied himself 100% to Trump. Just won't even call him out on defunding the Gateway Tunnel, which is this huge infrastructure project, the biggest in the nation, that Trump has said he's going to terminate. And oddly, my opponent said that's not a New Jersey problem. So he won't stand up to the president on anything.
I'm curious, as someone who went to the Naval Academy, who was a Navy pilot, how you felt about that gathering in Quantico, Virginia, of military leaders from all around the world, basically getting lectured by the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. I wonder how you felt when you were watching that.
We have our military members have such a difficult choice. At what point are you serving your country in one of the most powerful organizations in the United States and trying to keep this train from careening off the tracks and trying to keep Hegseth, the most incompetent Secretary of Defense we've ever had, who's an alcoholic, has credible claims of sexual assault against him, has run every organization he's been in charge of into the ground? How do you how can you stay at your job and try to keep the train from running off the tracks? Or at what point do you become complicit? And you just saw with the admiral who quit in the wake of the bombings of some of the ships off of South America, saying, he could no longer serve if that was the job. But it's this really difficult choice. I hear from people in the military. I hear it from people at U.S. attorneys' offices across the country who are just trying to figure out, how do I fulfill my oath to serve this country? And at what point, like I said, do you just find that you're complicit? It's really difficult. And I kept thinking of that as I was watching this. And then, it's been heartbreaking really to watch some of this, because what's so awful about what's going on now in our military is we had come so far. So we had a superintendent who was a woman. We had a chief of naval operations, the highest ranking person in the Navy, who was a woman. We had the first CEO of an aircraft carrier. A good portion of our midshipmen were women. It felt so different. It felt like everything, all the kind of knocks that I took and people of my era took as women in the military were worth it because we built something better. And now to see some of that being taken apart is hard to watch.
Well, I'll bite, Mikey. At what point do they become complicit? I mean, when they talk to you about that, whether they're lawyers in U.S. attorneys' offices or if they're members of the military, they obviously are wrestling with this. What are you hearing from those folks in terms of like whether they stay or whether they go and whether they speak out?
Yeah, it's a really difficult choice. And some people feel they don't have much of a choice if they have a family to feed and if they have, a year out. But I know one gentleman who had 18 years, so 20 years is a retirement with all the benefits. He had 18 years and he quit because he felt like he had, was about to cross the line. And I think sometimes it depends on what your job is. And sometimes it depends, sometimes it's picking your moment. If you feel as if, okay, something is coming and, it would be more powerful for me to speak out at the right time. But I struggle because, I have family members in the military and I'm just not sure. I struggle with, should I start to advocate for them to get out? Should I start to say, you guys got to go, before you find yourselves, on the streets of Chicago? Or do we need them there to try to dissuade others at this point? And so I think sometimes it's a matter of the role you're in and that, if you find yourself closer and closer to that choice. But it's really tough too, because in the military, you can't just quit. You know what I'm saying? You can't all of a sudden just, for many people, it's very hard to resign. You might have a service contract that you have to fulfill. So it's really tough. And I struggle with how I feel about it all the time as well and what the right time would be.
I'm curious, you say that your opponent, Jack Ciattarelli, is really, hitching his wagon to Donald Trump's star or holding on to his coattails, however you want to describe it. How much of this campaign for you has involved talking about Donald Trump versus your vision for New Jerseyans? Because I think one of the criticisms, as you well know, of the Democratic Party is people know what they are against, but they don't really know what they stand for anymore. And it's not a very unified vision for the country. So I'm curious how you've been able to balance those two things.
So two things. I've always run really hard races. In fact, the first race I ran in 2018, Michael Moore had done a documentary on running a ficus tree against my opponent in that race because he said he was so entrenched that it wouldn't matter if you ran a ficus tree or Democrat against him, that nobody was going to notice. He was just going to win again and again. So um, feeling that I could do better than a ficus tree, I entered the race and we were able to have the largest red to blue swing in the entire nation because I started by listening to everyone, by just, finding out what is that thing that's keeping you up at night and what can I do as a member of Congress or now as your governor to address that. And I'll tell you, affordability. And I know, it's almost sometimes when the answer is somewhat simple or widely known, people think you're missing something. You hear that this is about affordability because that's what people are feeling. And so it is, housing costs have gone up here in New Jersey by 50% over the last 5 years. Electricity costs went up 20% this summer. We have some of the highest property taxes in the nation. And so all of that has led to a real focus on how Trent needs to work better and addressing very specifically. I'm going to declare a state of emergency on energy costs on day one and freeze rate hikes. Nobody's ever done that before. And I think people need to see that as governor, I mean business. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to commission a study and in, 1,000 years we'll do something. It's day one. I'm going to stop this so you can breathe a little bit as we continue to put more power on the grid and drive down costs, et cetera. So it's a very proactive focus on what you can do at the state level as governor to address people's needs. But I think you still hear criticism. Oh, sometimes I'll hear, oh, Mikie mentions Trump too much. Well, I think what people might be missing, what's different from 24 and now, is Trump is the president and he's destroying the economy of the United States and attacking New Jersey. So if I ran a campaign where I didn't mention that he's running a worldwide extortion scheme whereby tariffs go up on prices go up on everyone here as he's made $5 billion, then people might not understand that I care about their grocery store prices or their cup of coffee and what I'm battling to make sure eventually I can drive that down. Or if I didn't take him on and say, look, he's trying to freeze funding that Congress has appropriated for the Gateway Tunnel, and 200,000 New Jerseyans take that tunnel a day, they might not think I really get what's at stake here. And so he is the president now, and Democrats do have to take him on. But I would suggest, and what is so far seems to be successful here, and we'll know more November 4th, is that when I take him on, it's very directly tied to people's pocketbooks. And so while, of course, I care deeply about our democracy, and I'm disgusted by his AI videos, and I think the whole plan for the White House is I'm a history major, is a historical building. Sure, I'm upset about it. But what I'm running on and what I'm talking to people about is cost and affordability and how I'm going to work to drive it down. Because there are a lot of people that are lying awake at night right now, not sure how they're going to, feed their family and pay their rent. And so that's what I'm focused on.
I'm curious how you feel about this sort of what seems to be a drift, though, in New Jersey towards Donald Trump. Hillary won New Jersey by 14 points in 2016, Joe Biden by 16 points in 2020, Kamala Harris won by 6 points in 2024. So I guess the question is, clearly there seems to be an erosion of some Democratic support in New Jersey. And I'm wondering if you would explain why you think that's happening.
I think what Democrats have missed is because I think we often see that Trump is acting in a way that's co-opting power, that's undermining people's opportunity, that's, tearing down the ability of women to succeed and people of color to succeed. And at the same time, just white working people to succeed, just really tearing apart all the ways we've generated success for generations of people. And co-opting power in a way that's very dangerous, whereby he's having people charged and arrested without good evidence anytime they go against him. And all of this is so beyond the pale to so many of us that it seems as if you almost are saying, like, there's a weird equivalency problem here, right? We have a president who's trying to become an autocrat and take away opportunity for people versus, on one side, and a Republican Party that's done nothing about it. And then on the other side, we have Democrats who are maybe bumbling and incompetent. But that's different, right? It feels different. But what people on the ground are feeling is that they told Democrats that their prices were too high. And the Democratic response was largely, or the Biden response was largely, no, look at the stock market, it's fine. And then Donald Trump said he would fix the affordability problem, and he's just raised costs. So now you have an electorate that's sort of in this position of, okay, Democrats didn't deliver. And then I tried Republicans, and that, you saw that in the swing to the right, and Trump hasn't delivered. And so this has oddly been one of the most nonpartisan elections I've run. And I know that sounds weird in these partisan times, but I go to a lot of diners. I know it's cliche, but I'm a Jersey politician. I go to a lot of diners and I talk to a lot of people. And historically, in the red areas of my state, I'll go in a diner and I'll talk to a couple people and tell them a little bit about my campaign. But, I'll find some people, I like Trump, or I'm a Republican, don't talk to me, kind of thing. This time, nobody has really said that to me. One woman, and I mean, I speak to thousands of people a day. One woman said, "I'm a Republican, so I won't be voting for you, but good luck." That's what she said to me. But that's it. Everybody else is, how are you going to lower my electricity costs? What are you going to do about housing costs here? What are you going to do about property taxes? I mean, everyone's been open to that discussion. I think people are searching for a leader that they can trust to really engage on those key issues for them. And so that feels very different. And I'll tell you, the vote by mail, and then we've had 2 days of early in-person voting, the vote seems to be, um, I think we'll see a better result than last year. I'm knocking on wood here. I get a little nervous talking this close to the election. I'm not sure how much of that, I'm not looking at, I don't think we're looking at like Hillary Clinton type numbers in New Jersey, that kind of swing, but I do think we're starting to the, you know, build the Democratic Party back on the ground. And a lot of that's through working people who just realize their costs are going up, and Trump has really destroyed their ability to succeed.
I'm curious, obviously the Democrats are hoping and people who are upset with the Trump administration are hoping to send a big message during the midterms that they're not happy with the direction of the country by, potentially changing Congress and electing more Democrats. And we have all these redistricting battles going on, as you well know. But I'm curious if in your campaign you're meeting people who are Republicans and are upset about the way the Trump administration is doing business. And their vote for you is as much as about their own pocketbooks as it is about sort of the future of democracy. Are you hearing, you said you're focusing on kitchen table issues, but are you hearing people talk about that? Is it resonating in a statewide election, I guess is what I'm curious about.
I think sometimes what people miss when they're talking about issues of democracy is that it's a little baked in. So depending on how you look at the democracy and what's going on here, and if you have really strong feelings on it, then you probably are a diehard Democrat or a diehard Republican. And so it's really what we're the people we're talking to, and the people we need to make our case to are people that generally vote on pocketbook issues. That's why you've just heard for years it's the economy stupid. And yet you think, and yet we hear more about democracy because those are people that are really focused on these issues and are deeply immersed in it. But you're kind
And
of
who are also who are speaking out, who are
and are
talking
speaking
about
out.
it, right?
Yet a lot of people who are just trying to live their lives and trying to make ends meet and get their kids to school tune into the election and are, not aren't focused on this daily for every, 365 days a year, but rather come into an election and are like, okay, who's going to make my life better? And I'm struggling right now. And wow, I just, my grocery prices haven't gone down. Oh, look, and now my gas is going up, and now we're not taking a vacation this summer. So
And now we may lose our health care.
and now we may lose our healthcare. Now, so they're gauging who is going to address that. And I'll tell you, I usually, given my congressional district, I usually win with about a quarter of registered Republicans in the swing, a large portion of the swing vote. So I don't usually do that by taking people on, so are you sorry you voted for Trump? How do you like that vote now? Look at your cost of your eggs. I don't kind of go right there, but I do hear, I know the numbers in some of my communities of who voted, who swung. And I do think that a lot of the communities that are very sensitive to tariffs are taking a second look. So we've seen, a lot of the numbers in the Latino community where Republicans were saying that they'd really, gotten some good inroads into the Latino community. Well, a lot of our community here has a lot of trade with South America, and they have small businesses, they import food, etc. So they're very cost sensitive. They're small businesses, and we're seeing a swing back there. A lot of the Indian American community Trump was in a really good place with Modi, if you recall, and now he's put 50% tariffs on India, which a lot of the goods sold in some of the small businesses run by Indian Americans here in New Jersey are only found in India, some of the clothing and the food. So I think we are seeing some of the small business community, which is being really harmed by this, backing away. We'd also, though, anecdotally, I just kept hearing about all these young people swinging to the right, especially young men. Young men were really going for Trump. And I have been speaking to a lot of people getting ready to graduate from college, and the jobs have dried up. And it's not just people are worried about their job prospects. It's people who had a job offer that has been rescinded. I'm not sure everyone realizes how quickly this economy has undergone such radical destruction. But I'll tell you, a little bit over a year ago, I was hearing from our businesses here that they needed to expand and they needed a workforce. Now I'm hearing from mayors saying stuff like, we had a jobs fair, 1,500 people came out for 5 jobs. I could hardly get employers there. Small businesses, because of these costs associated with tariffs, are going out of business. They just can't pass enough on, it all on to their customers. And then large businesses, instead of expanding as they were going to do before Trump got into office, have been contracting just to, because it's kind of, and you can shut me up if this goes down a boring rabbit hole, but it's fascinating to me. As I talk to these big businesses, one of them was telling me, a big New Jersey company, they have a whole North American market. And so Trump said, reshore American manufacturing. That's where he was going. So they reshore American manufacturing. And yet they had manufacturing up in Canada. They reshore it. Trump gets into a big tariff war. So he puts tariffs on Canada. Canada does reverse tariffs. And then Canadians don't buy American. So suddenly their North American business is a disaster because they thought they read what Trump was going to do correctly, but it's so chaotic, you really can't plan for this. So now instead of trying to game the system out anymore, they're just like, look, we're just contracting, we're laying people off, and we're going to try to wait this one out. So that's why you see even big corporations are suddenly contracting. That's why you see the reports. 22, I think, states are in recession right now already. So it's happened really quickly, and I think people are just starting to realize the impacts of it.
I think, as you said, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that makes it very difficult for businesses to plan for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of on again, off again, what will happen next is a really difficult environment, I know, for small businesses. I wanted to ask you about ICE raids because it seems governors across the country have really become front and center. If you look at J.B. Pritzker, for example, in Illinois, and what's happening in Chicago. I know that New Jersey is home to nearly 2 million immigrants and refugees, and you have sought to ban ICE agents from covering their faces. But how else, if you're elected, Congresswoman, would you address the administration's attacks on immigrants? I recently read that 170 U.S. citizens have been held by immigration agents. This was from ProPublica, and the headline is they've been kicked, dragged, and detained for days. Obviously, civil rights advocates are arguing about the lack of due process in these raids, the violence of them, this family separation, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just curious, is there anything you could actually do if you're elected about this?
Yeah, so this is exactly where I think those of us who've served around the world, as I have in the military, understood this was headed. When you start to see these attacks, it doesn't end with people who are undocumented. The president was co-opting so much power and then putting together these forces and hiring up ICE agents really, really quickly and forming, what I would call a secret police force. I'm hearing in DHS that they're taking loyalty oaths to the administration, not the Constitution. So it's really dangerous. And so I kept telling people, you should all be worried about this because it doesn't end here. It ends as the president starts to attack enemies of the state, as they would be called in other countries around the world, where people start to be disappeared in the middle of the night. And we're already seeing that, as you said, with U.S. citizens. And I've heard parents telling kids, parents who are citizens and children who are citizens, telling their children, to carry their passport with them and afraid that they might get picked up and detained. And so it's a really scary time, which is why I have said here in New Jersey, I'm going to make sure that along with our public safety officers, people can go to church safely, they can go to schools safely, they can go to healthcare appointments safely, they can report crime safely. And part of the reason I'm so adamant about having agents be identifiable is I don't know if everyone has kind of contextualized what's happening. So I was talking to a police officer here who was telling me about in his town, he came upon a guy, as he put it, dressed like he was going to Afghanistan. So here you have these people who are just hired really, really quickly to start to get into this agency. I don't know that they're given much training. And then they're kitted out with all kinds of weapons. They've got masks on. You can't tell who they are. They're not identifiable. So he went up to the guy and he said, "Who are you? Give me some ID. You know, you're in my town and you're carrying weapons." Imagine if you're walking with your kid down the street and this person's like in front of the grocery store. So the guy goes, "I don't have to show you anything." And he goes, "Well, then I'm going to take you to jail." And this guy goes, "Well, then I'm going to take you to jail." And the police officer goes, "Fine, we'll fight it out in jail. It's my town, buddy." And finally, he shows him some ID. He was an ICE agent. But I mean, that's unacceptable. So that's why, as governor, I'm going to empower our police to keep people here safe and continue to fight some of what's going on here in court, because you're exactly right. There are no due process. There's a violation of different due process rights. There are grave concerns about who people are picking up, people who are here legally, and the community is very afraid. And there's the whole public safety. There's the fear that I hate. I hate to think that our community is afraid, or people can't sleep at night, or people are worried about their kids coming home to an empty house if they get picked up. I mean, that is unacceptable. But we're also seeing it as a huge attack on the economy. People are afraid to go to work. We're seeing people not show up at the port. We have one of the biggest ports in the nation. So it's really it's really the opposite of what any good government would do or good planning would lead you to do. And then we have that's just one aspect of it. The other thing is the National Guard troops. And then the president saying he wants to use our cities as training grounds for our military. And so we've seen great success with governors taking this to court in California and Oregon and Illinois to show that this is illegal and get rid of the National Guard troops. But you won't see that if you have Republican governors. And then I would just flag finally, along these lines, we have the DOJ now coming into two states, and it's California and New Jersey. And I don't know if your viewers or listeners know, but California now has Prop 50 on the ballot to
Right.
restrict.
Yeah.
So Trump,
Which is basically, why don't you explain what Prop 50 is?
so Trump is redistricting to cheat the election system in the midterms. So he's calling, so largely, as my mom might say, no good deed goes unpunished. So largely Democratic states decided to do bipartisan fair redistricting. Republican states kept the partisan redistricting going. So what Trump has done is go to all the Republican state governors and say, look, just redistrict and make me some new districts so I can win, hold the majority. In several of the Democratic states, you have to go through a different process to redistrict with input from the people. So Prop 50 would allow California to redistrict because Texas has redistricted. I believe it was based on that, if I remember.
Right. It was. Yes.
So this is a ballot measure that the people of California will vote on for their redistricting. They put forward some redistricting. And then New Jersey is one of only two states with a competitive election. And so Trump is putting DOJ monitors in California and New Jersey. And we have a U.S. attorney here, Aline Haba, who has said that she is going to turn New Jersey red. So it's, as you can imagine, I think an attempt to really attack the vote here suggests it's not fair as Trump tries to undermine faith in our democracy. But we've worked really hard to run a fair election system. And I think, if anything, this will get more people out to vote because, New Jerseyans don't really like to be threatened like that. So I think this might activate some people, and get them out to the polls.
I live in New York City, and I have to ask you about this ad that's been running on a loop, as you well know. It was when you struggled to answer a local New York reporter who asked you if you could pass one piece of legislation, what would it be? I wondered if you could take me back to that moment, and I'm sure you'd like to do that interview again,
Yes.
Mikey.
Right.
So, if you would like a do-over, I'd love to re-ask you that question. If you could pass one piece of legislation, what would it be? And I'm sure you've thought about this many times, like, I should have said this, I should have said that.
Right. Right. Yes. Well, as you might have heard, affordability is the key issue here. So that's why I am going to immediately, as I said, put a freeze on rate hikes, but it will take legislation in the budget to pass money to modernize our natural gas facilities, to end some of the regulatory and permitting framework that's keeping us from putting solar onto our closed landfills and rooftops. So I'll get that done right away in legislation, as well as adding battery storage to some of the areas where we can connect them rapidly. And then expand in the budget the first time home buyers program so that people can get into a home, because right now that's a huge issue, as well as legislation to take on the PBMs. Those are those middlemen in drug pricing that are driving up some of the pharmaceutical prices up to by 10 times. So really, housing, healthcare, utilities, those are the key issues that I hear about, and the key pieces of legislation I'll immediately pass so we can really continue to work to drive costs down.
When you answered the way you did afterwards, were you like, did you do a whole Homer Simpson, like, "Do," kind of,
Yeah, I
break?
just, I feel like that might have been one of the first interviews right there. And I was just so mad at myself. Yes.
Well, I'm glad I got an opportunity to ask you that question again, because I think it's pretty clear what you wanna do. I wanted to ask you about, how your opponent's campaign filed for access to your military records, and the National Archives then gave them your full personnel record, largely unredacted, turned it over to reporters. I guess the campaign, Chitterelli's campaign, then turned it over to reporters. What did you think of that? What kind of legal action have you taken? And I understand his campaign is now under federal investigation. Can you bring us up to speed on that? And hey, are you having fun running for governor?
This, New Jersey is known for rough campaigns, but certainly my opponent and Trump really go outside the pale of anything you would expect. But I guess this is the new normal, unfortunately. We just really have to keep fighting it with everything we've got so that we can take, take back the presidency and the House and the Senate. And of course, the president's already saying he's going to illegally try to stay in office. So it's really important that we continue to find ways to push back. But unfortunately, my opponent sent someone to get my military records. And that person was told, no, this is has privacy protected. So you would need to have a social security. I would need to sign for it. And then, so this was right before the primary, but a couple days, 2 days after the primary, this person went back and found somebody um, who was willing to give him the records. I'm sure he'd been told to call. So that person, then someone at the archives, had to have my social. So what they did was they went into a government VA database to pull my social so they could get access to my military records. And then they were supposed to have a signature, which they didn't have. They were supposed to notify the Navy that they were releasing them, which they didn't do. They just dumped it onto this person from Jack Chitterelli's campaign who said he was shocked and disgusted to see my unredacted social security number, to see my parents' unredacted information on my 80-year-old parents' address, etc. And yet, instead of flagging that this was a problem, as with his shock and disgust, decided to instead turn it over to a journalist. And So I've had veterans from across the state saying, you really need to protect records. I need you to be governor. I need you to protect records. And then some stuff, as I was going, I had been hearing from a lot of seniors because they've been very worried about their Social Security information being released by DOJ. And then I was talking to Josh Shapiro, who's the governor of Pennsylvania, and he was telling me about how the Trump administration had demanded that he turn over all of the voting files. And the voting files include Social Security numbers and driver's license information, driver's license numbers and addresses. And he had said no. They're in court now fighting it out. But I since have learned that some governors, Republican governors, are turning that over to Donald Trump, which is really scary to me, thinking of how he might be using that in an attempt to attack people and sort of cheat the system and the vote.
Good times.
It is like times we haven't seen, but that's why it's why I'm running. I mean, if it's just these I think governors are really standing in the breach now. I told you I was talking to Shapiro about that. Gavin Newsom is telling me how he's out in California, he's making insulin. He's having a factory in California make insulin because Trump is so screwing up the supply chains and not driving down cost. Mara Haley is helping in the northeastern part of the United States to set up a coalition of states that I will work with her on as governor to make sure we're getting good medical data out, that people have access to vaccines, and that insurance companies pay for them in the wake of RFK Jr. But this is how we've got to go forward. I have a big pharmaceutical manufacturing base, and I've had people tell me with this FDA, they're not sure how they're getting new drugs to market. It is really dire, and I think it's going to have to be governors that take the lead here.
Well, I really appreciate your time. I know that you have to go. As I said, tomorrow will be 1 week away from Election Day. Early voting is happening, and I'm sure you have many people that you still want to meet and talk to. So I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me on this Substack interview. We have a really great Substack community of smart people who are really interested in hearing longer conversations with people like you. So, Mikie, Sherrill, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've never met you, and just thank you for everything you've done for the country, serving the country as a Navy helicopter pilot and a former federal prosecutor. You're a very impressive woman, Mikie,
Well,
Sherrill.
back at you. It has truly been an honor. I've always been an admirer from afar, so it really has been an honor to be on the Substack with you, and thank you so much.
Well, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in. And all right, I guess that's it, everyone.
This will be
right?
available on YouTube after too.
Yes, this will be available to watch on YouTube, anyone, but also on Substack, either one. Pick your poison on your social media platform. Thank you very much, and great to meet you. And that's it.
Well,
I
thank
don't know
you so
why.
much. And
I
if
don't know why I'm
anyone
having
wants
so much trouble wrapping
yeah.
up this interview, but thank you.
Well, if anyone wants to find out more, please go to MikieSherrill.com. And thank you so much. It's been great.
Okay, see you later. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.